what products are patients buying that are dental products? The ones that are recommended by their dentist. Every Colgate and Crest and Philips Sonicare toothbrush and ad ends with the most often recommended product by your dentist. And dentists ultimately stopped recommending direct to consumer because they said, hey, here are all these problems that we're seeing.
Okay, so Alex, I was doing my nightly scroll through Facebook just to doom scroll a little bit. So I saw, it's come up a couple times because I feel like Facebook just knows us better than we know ourselves. It was one of those ads for that robot dentist. I don't know, have you seen that at all?
No.
It was interesting. I mean, I didn't deep dive really into it, but it was kind of creepy because it's and maybe this has been out for a bit, I don't know, but it pretty much was doing procedures for you.
Is it an arm or an actual person?
No,
are we talking George Jetson, the robot in George Jetson, that thing?
I don't know if it to that point. I don't think it's got a face and it's talking to you and it's a screen. That's hey,
cool.
So and so, I'll be here and taking care of you today. No, I don't think it was anything.
It's just robot intense. Arms.
Yeah, it's probably one of those where it's the dentist still comes in, says hi, and is I'm gonna tag team in my robot buddy, and then give him a high five, and then he comes in.
So I'm picturing the robot arms that you make alcoholic drinks at the bar, where they're just take this and mix it and stuff.
Yeah. I don't think it's envisioned to replace looking like a human and being a person.
Okay.
So not Jetsonish.
Okay.
And then it got me thinking, I was okay, now we are officially getting outsourced, right? Now we don't need to do anything.
We don't need you.
Yeah. So maybe in the future we will just be the diagnosers and that's it. And then that'll probably get taken over too at some point. But it kind of made me think more about this whole concept of, that I think is far, 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 far into the future. But there's a lot of things going in dental right now that I feel is this trend of outsourcing a lot of stuff.
Okay.
And I mean, it seems like, at least for me, the reason I would be doing it is so I can do less work, right?
Yeah, sounds like you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, that's definitely the trend to kind of stay productive, money-wise.
Yeah.
Have your same production, but do, like you said, less work. And a great way to do that is, sending that out to either someone else or having a robot do it or AI or...
Yeah, and I think
else.
Right now the other problem it helps solve a bit, which I think is a big pain point for all of us in dentistry now, is staffing and training and retraining people. So I think when you can outsource something and have someone else take over some of that from you, I think that's, if I'm being sold something and I hear that, my ears perk up a little bit because I'm I don't have to train another person again on this. So I think that's part of it too. But anyways, I figured it would be cool to bring on Nick Greenfield today. So he's the co-founder of Candid. Just a little bit of a background. So they're a clear aligner company. They go to the dentist and to patients and the concept, and Nick will do a much better job explaining it than I do right now after I botch this. But basically, it's a way for more GPs to be able to feel more comfortable doing ortho and being able to get patients to do ortho more, because I feel like that is one thing we miss a lot in dentistry is we focus on cavities, we focus on perio health, we don't really focus on occlusion a lot. And I feel like there's probably, which I'm sure Nick can give us some stats on it, I'm sure there are a lot of people that can benefit from ortho that we just tend to kind of glance over, skirt around.
Yeah, maybe.
And some of that's probably just from not feeling comfortable, or we weren't trained as well as we were in how to diagnose a cavity in dental school. So I feel like he's kind of helping bridge that gap.
Awesome.
Within dental. So thanks for coming on, Nick.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So was I semi-accurate in that description or was I way off?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think what we're trying to do is design and build a solution for orthodontics around the general dentist. And what we've seen is every other solution that's out there, be it the big blue company or all the what I would call generics, which all the big public dental companies have a generic aligner solution designed first around the orthodontist and then gave the product to dentists and said, here you go. And it didn't really solve the pain points and the problems, which you mentioned, which is dental school. You don't learn how to move teeth. So you either need to go do an orthodontic residency and become an orthodontist, or you need to do a lot of clin ed or a lot of trial and error, which is not optimal, right? You got to figure out the right way to do it. And so what we said was similar to that robot you were talking about at the top of the show. How do you give a general dentist the confidence that if they can diagnose malocclusion with their patient, which the stat there is about 75% of adult patients have some form of malocclusion, if they can diagnose it and they can prescribe orthodontic treatment, how do you keep that treatment for the most part, for most cases, not all cases, some need to get referred, but how do you keep that in-house? And the answer to that is you've got to have a clinical tool and a practice efficiency tool that allows you to treat orthodontics and treat it well to high quality outcomes, but it's got to also fit within your practice where you're running around sometimes like a chicken with your head cut off with, 4 different rooms going at once and 6 surgeries in a day and, you name it. So we tried to build Candid around that concept, which is orthodontics for the everyday general dentist.
Nice, because
awesome.
And kind of what you spoke on before is I remember, so 2 doors down from me is an orthodontist. And he was telling me about, he was going off of, I think, Invisalign and trying out a newer company that, had some different, value proposition on why it was better. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Can I do this too? And he's like, well, no, this company is only for orthodontists now. And so I was like, oh, well, okay, they're only going there first. So that kind of makes sense. It seems like a lot of these companies, maybe they try to go in just with orthodontists first. And then now that company does go to general dentists, I think. But
moving teeth is hard. Right. And there's every stage, right? It's 4-dimensional because you're moving teeth in 3 dimensions through time. And that means that if you're a dentist and you haven't really learned how to do it or what to do, you're kind of taking risk in your patient, and your patient all of a sudden goes on what's supposed to be a 9-month journey and it takes 2 years, and you've eaten up 15, 20 office visits of chair time and your patient's not getting to the end. And finally they cry uncle and say, okay, we're done. But you don't actually get them to that end state result. And that's what we hear over and over again from the grand majority of general dentists is outside of these very, very simple cases where you're doing a tiny little setup, maybe pre-restorative. They don't feel confident in treating kind of everyday malocclusion in the way that the call it top 5-10% of GP orthos, which are general dentists who know how to do orthodontics, know how to do. And so what we do is provide a US licensed orthodontist to do all the case setups on behalf of the dentist. And that way they know, hey, there's a doctor there who knows what they're doing. They know clear aligners. If I get in trouble, they can help me. Right. So they can provide that kind of crutch, good initial setup. If there's a refinement, they'll help me think through the refinement. And if the case is something I should refer out, they're going to tell me, don't do this case. Right. This is a crazy class 3 surgical case. You need to refer this to the orthodontist down the street from you. And so getting that provides an element of confidence that you're outsourcing not the treatment itself, but you're outsourcing a lot of the challenging parts of not having had the education and the confidence around providing true orthodontic treatment.
Yeah, I mean, you're outsourcing the gaps that you have in the knowledge. And I mean, to kind of go on mine, like when I first started and we opened the practice, Alex did more Invisalign than I did, because I feel like if there's anything that I don't know, I'm just like, hands up, I'm not going to do it, right? Unless I'm like super, super comfortable. You probably learn and retain information better than I do anyways, but you did some cases with Invisalign.
I took an Invisalign course right out of school, and then did like a Rondo seminars type of course over the course of like a year or something like that. So I still don't feel qualified to treat ortho, because there's a lot of stuff and there's so many things. Well, but anyway, going back to
and I know for me, mine definitely went back to dental school when it was second year, and we're learning how to do everything before you see patients, right? And so we're sitting in that, lab in the basement, 100 of us in just this big, sweaty room with no air conditioning. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe it had air conditioning. I'll just remember that it didn't. And then I remember when we did our little ortho part, and they were like, all right, the first step of this is you guys have to learn how to like bend a wire, mm-hmm. right? Okay. On like your, just a lingual retainer. And I was so bad at it. Like, I'm pretty sure I had to have someone do it for me because
Yeah, like 18 kinks in it.
Yeah, and you know, like I remember it was Neil in our class because I think he was a dental. He had worked in a dental lab before.
Yeah.
He cranked those things out like in a minute. I'm like, why is this taking me 3 hours? I suck at this. Do I not see things in 3 dimension? Did I just figure that out now? I only see things in 2 dimensions. Maybe I learned that about myself. But I was awful at it. And so like that negative experience, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to move on to step 2. Like, this sucks. Yeah. So then I think in your brain, you're just like, I'm shutting off ortho. There's 0% chance I'm ever putting brackets on a teeth, right? And I don't want to do it because the experience wasn't good. And then when you get into 3rd and 4th year in dental school, you know, our school had a specialty program in there, an ortho program. So they're going to keep all the cases. So unless you're shadowing, you're not going to really get the experience.
Yeah, true.
So then you graduate and then you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to take a CE course over the weekend. But then, you know, it's not a problem. But our thing is we did startups. So it's not like we had a dentist that was mentoring us who was like a, you know, platinum Invisalign or whatever that is, Invisalign provider or whatever
Diamond,
they call
platinum,
them.
yeah, whatever.
And so you don't have that mentorship or someone that you're around all the time that can teach you. And so you're just kind of feel like you're winging it a little bit. And then you're just like, well, I don't want to do this.
And I would add, you might learn how to start a case in that course, but you don't learn how to finish the case. And that's the hard part, right? Starting the case, getting patient to accept the case, fine. But most things in dentistry you're doing and you're finishing in 1 or 2 or, you know, 4 visits. And for ortho, historically, you're looking at, you know, it could take 2 years and it could take 10, 15, 20 visits. So you don't get that, you don't get those data points. We had an orthodontist who was involved with the company for a long time, and he used to say you could be a bad orthodontist for about 5 years and no one would know, because that's how long it takes to get all those cases through. It's very different than general dentistry as we know it today.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Sorry, I know I was just about to say something, but as per usual, I think I cut her off and started talking. But I mean, for me, I think a lot of it, like you alluded to, Nick, was it's what happens after you do something. So even if it was like oral surgery, right? You, I feel like, are good at, and when I say you,
Pointing.
Alex, you, is good at learning about how do I handle the complication or how do I handle what happens after it, right? So you are always drawn more to oral surgery and we're good at it because you had confidence on, all right, when I try to take the tooth out and it's not moving a certain way, I know what step B is. Then I know what step C is. And so I think you have to have confidence in once you've gotten confidence in how do I handle scenario A, B, and C that can happen, whether it is a quick procedure like OS or it is ortho, when you have confidence in that piece, then I think you're more comfortable in general. So I do like that. You know, I would have used, if this was around when we did our startups or it was more like commonplace, right? I would have used, this would have been perfect for someone like me that they could have helped with those, like, all right, what do I do here?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
I think edge cases are hard to get experience in without just going through it, right? So ideally you can find somebody who's done hundreds or thousands of reps, be it, you know, the orthodontist down the street, or you find a product, which is what CandidPro tries to deliver, that can help you through those experiences. But I think when you look at that theme from an automation perspective, this is where technology will come in and help dentists do better at getting more both case acceptance from patients, but also help identify different components. So you think about the AI tools that have come out recently, Pearl over Jet Vidya as good examples there, right? It's not that you don't know how to find the cavity. You know how to do that till you're blue in the face, but they help you present that to your patient in a way where the patient believes it's you and the AI both have identified this problem and the issue that's there. So I think there's a lot of tools that technology will help first before it takes over everything. It will help you as a dentist be able to both improve the efficiency of your business, but also build more trust with your patient. And that's one of the things we've seen on the Candid side, where the orthos write out the diagnosis for the patient. When they review it, they write out what they're doing in the treatment plan. And then a lot of the dentists who are using CandidPro can show their patients, hey, this is exactly what this ortho who's looked at this case has said. And that way, again, it provides a supporting infrastructure for you as a dentist to drive case acceptance and drive patient buy-in. Because a lot of times patients don't want to feel sold. They need to fix their malocclusion. They need to get that cavity fixed. But a lot of times and all of the patient work that we've seen, they feel like their dentist is trying to pay for the boat, right? And not actually help them. And so these AI tools really help deliver credibility for the dentist, where like, I truly do see a cavity, and this is where it was 6 months, and this is where it was today. Let's evaluate and look at that to make sure that you're actually getting the care that you need.
Yeah, it's like it's using the AI or technology with human oversight to help with it. So like with what you guys are doing, right? And kind of the future of ortho with, where you see it going, is a lot of the technology or AI that you guys are using. Can you explain what you guys are doing? And is it more like internal for your company, or does some of those tools actually help the dentist and the patient?
There are boards all around the world that are saying like, okay, what are you doing to use more AI? And I think dentistry is actually one of the leading places where AI is being used both internally. So in the computer aided design components of, automatically generating the crown, right? That is an AI tool when you think about, when you think about restorative. For us, we're using AI for setting cases up. So it's not that the entire case is driven fully in an automated way, but the initial setup, rather than it taking 5 or 6 hours to use computer-aided design tools to move every single tooth at every stage, the AI can predict, okay, this is about where the teeth should go based on the algorithms that we've given it, and to say, hey, this is what we want these arches to look like. And then a technician can go in and make adjustments. And over time, it'll get more and more efficient. So maybe today it takes us an hour and a half to set up a case to really do it well. That number will then go down to 10 or 15 minutes. And eventually it could be almost instant, where then it goes to you chair-side, and you're able to make some of those adjustments. Just like today, you can do chair-side crowns, right? Is like, are here, you use a 3 shape, or you can use somebody else and you can get that chair-side crown, and then you can mill it directly. Aligners will move in that direction. Not that you'll necessarily manufacture your own, but you'll be able to get a high quality treatment plan super quickly. That's not just AI, but maybe AI plus a human ortho, for example, reviewing and making sure it's right.
Yeah, that's a really cool way to do it, because I always found when I had to treatment plan Invisalign, this was always my biggest problem, was that I would look, and Invisalign had different, I don't know what they have now, but it was like an Express 5, Express 10, and then their full case. They have different tiers of like how crowded your teeth are or whatever, and what you needed to do. So I would look and be like, oh, this is kind of like an in-betweener. It's like, is it an Invisalign 10 or is it a full case? And I've gotten burned before where I've been like, I think it's an Invisalign 10. And so I'll submit it, and I talk to the patient about it, and like, okay, here's our price for this type of case, and it would come back and it'd be like, this is where you're going to get with the Invisalign 10, and you kind of need a full case to get everything aligned. And I'm like, oh crap. So now I got to bring the patient back, give them the bad news of, hey, this is going to take a lot longer and cost more money. And now, like, I just blew the case. So it took me one time for that to happen, and I've never done that again. I've always been, okay, this might be a full case. I'm always like, kind of pedaling around, on ice, going, I don't know, like what if this is a full case or not. Probably saying, hey, this might be a full case, but then submitting it as a 10, see what I get, and then if it comes back, we could do it in 10 aligners. Then saying, hey, now I have good news, patient. We don't have to do a full case. We can probably get this done in 6 months for this amount. And then it's usually like, okay, let's move forward. So that workflow has always been, and I don't know if other GPs are like that too. Yeah. That's always been our stumbling block of like the big guessing.
Well, I think it's the guessing, like you said, and then I think it's the time. And so what Nick was saying is, people are ready to accept treatment or buy whatever you want to say, buy treatments, whatever, accept what you're saying they need, like right there. The longer you wait, right, the lower I'm sure the case acceptance gets. So if AI or technology can get that down to 10, 15 minutes, you can have someone come in the chair and then they can start that same day, and you have confidence that what you're presenting to them actually is legit, and you don't have all those stumbling blocks like you said. So I think that's really cool.
We as a company for years have debated the light express version of the world, and we have stayed away. We did one pilot, but we've stayed away from anything but comprehensive. going back to what I said at the beginning, designing the product around the needs of the general dentist. Most general dentists can't look at a case and see it and say, yeah, this is going to be 12 stages, right? Because then there's refinements and how compliant will the patient be? And there's all these other things going around. So we are shortly rolling out a light product that will be, I think, that will meet the needs of the market, but we have really resisted, and we get feedback all the time from our customers. When's your light product coming out? Why aren't you doing this? But it's one of those things where, again, if you're an expert dentist, you know when it's a light case. But if you do 5 cases a year, 10 cases a year, 15 cases a year, it's really hard to know, are you going to really nail it? And then even if you nail it, is the patient going to nail it by wearing their trays? Which is the other side of this, is like, if you do all the best work, set up the best treatment plan ever, and then the patient's non-compliant, and then you end up in kind of a challenging cycle. So it is one of the hard parts. It is the closest thing in dentistry to value-based care, where the patient pays one price up front, and then you got to figure out how to minimize your costs, right? All the way through. Instead of, if they pay $5,000 up front and all of a sudden you have 25 office visits and it takes you 2.5 years, that's not a profitable case. So you got to make sure that you're setting yourself up appropriately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I mean, your background in being involved in the orthodontics business for like years now, right? Like, when you guys first started everything, did you guys mainly launch as direct to consumer, meaning you were going to patients? So similar, I know whatever the name has a bad rap with it, but like how Smile Direct Club did it, right?
Right.
Is it initially, were you guys close to that? And then, I know now obviously you're working with dentists. Like what was the reason for pivoting? Like just.
The first thing that we did was, before we started the company, was build out a network of orthodontists who would oversee treatment. And we did that because kind of at our core, and I think still reflected in the CandidPro product today, is we believe that nearly every case should have at least the eyes of an orthodontist on it who knows how to move teeth, unless you are wildly confident in your ability to do that. So we started there, and that was really different than, there were 2 other kind of players that existed in our space, both of which are gone, right? Smile Direct Club, which went bankrupt, and then Bite, which was acquired by Dentsply Sirona for $1 billion, yep. And then had over 3,000 MDRs, which are FDA filings that they had to make last year. And then the FDA and Dentsply Sirona kind of combined shut them down. Both of those are gone. So we always had a meaningfully higher clinical lens and approach, and that's how the company was started. Ultimately, a combination of both the business model not really working in direct to consumer, and we hit almost 100 million in annual revenue in that business, and the clinical applications that we saw is those edge cases, right? Of seeing where, hey, if you don't get, you're not using the articulator, the articulation paper, and you're not taking a post-treatment scan, and that patient's a little off, and they're a little edge to edge, and they're getting a little bit of wearing, the patient's going to have no idea, right? So being able to fulfill through a dentist not only made commercial sense, because 80% of patients want to get orthodontic care through their dentist. It's this crazy disconnect where patients want it through their dentist, and dentists don't want to give it to the patients because they don't know how to do it, right? So that's where the product came in. And the second part of it was that there were probably 30% of cases that ended up not getting treated because the orthodontist would say, we can't treat this through the direct-to-consumer model. And so even though we had retail stores, we were getting panoramic x-rays and full diagnostics and photos, and there was orthos reviewing everything, about half those patients needed dental work before they were going to start, or they needed a cleaning, and about half of them were just in this kind of could not treat remotely bucket because you didn't have all the tools that you'd need. We try to minimize attachments in IPR, but sometimes you need an attachment or an elastic, and that can only be delivered through the professional office. We made that move about 3 years ago. We fully shut down DTC, took $100 million in revenue to zero, and built back in B2B with same concept, network of orthodontists supporting general dentists, but the general dentist now delivering care to their patients who wanted care through them anyway and not through direct to consumer. So that's why we're the only player remaining of those kind of big 3 that started in DTC. The others didn't move. We made that pivot, and the business has been doing very well and growing since then.
So what do you think your main differentiator is between, CandidPro and Invisalign? Because most people are obviously familiar with Invisalign. what's kind of the value add with CandidPro?
I would go back to the fact that this is a product that's been designed around the needs of the general dentist. And that means we tried to build a solution that is maximally predictable, efficient, and profitable for a dentist. So we've included that US licensed ortho to help you review and help you treatment plan. And if when cases go off, live there in our platform, on the software side, creating videos, providing video calls included in the case fee. We're the only company that does that end to end to include that orthodontic expertise. Again, from our history and knowing that that was helpful. The second component is monitoring. So we include the only AI approved monitoring tool by the FDA as part of our monitoring solution today. So if you are a doctor, rather than needing to do 10, 15 office visits, the average CandidPro doctor sees their patient in person 3 times because they're able to have that patient scan their teeth at home with AI-powered monitoring every 1 to 2 weeks. And that replaces the need for these in-office checks because then a doctor can see, and the AI can actually see better than the human eye, whether the teeth are tracking the way that they're supposed to. And so ultimately this leads to, go ahead.
Sorry, does the monitoring go to you, the dentist? Like it would go to me, or would that go to one of the orthodontists to monitor it? How does that work?
Yeah, the monitoring, you can always have access to it. And then also the team at Candid has access to it. So we are able to automate the workflow. Anytime a patient should move on to the next stage, it'll just automatically tell that patient to move to the next stage. And when there's an issue, then you'll get flagged as the dentist. Hey, there's a problem here. Here are a couple options. Do you want to recall the patient? Do you want to move them on to the next step? Would you like to set up a call, or would you like to put them into refinement? And then you're able to make that selection. So you'll have all the data that you need, but you don't need to waste kind of these every 8-week aligner check appointments where it takes the patient 2 hours and takes you, 30, 45 minutes of chair time that you could be doing something else with. So it's, again, an efficiency play. And ultimately, it leads to more compliance from the patient. So patients finish cases faster. It leads to fewer refinements because you can catch when things go off track and have the patient stay in that aligner a little bit longer, an extra week or two, and then they can go on to the next stage. So we're about 32% faster in treatment versus kind of the main competitors out there. And then you end up with super high net promoter scores and satisfaction from both doctors and patients. So all of those, again, come together, designed around the dentist, right? Designed around the dentist workflow. How do we minimize office visits and get super high quality outcomes in really predictable ways?
So,
nice. Okay,
that makes sense. That's pretty cool. So going back, because this is where my head went because I think what's really cool about having you on is we almost have like an insider who was in the space with the whole DTC model and had to pivot. So I have a couple questions for you, and then you can tell me if this was a problem you guys dealt with, because I feel like when all this was happening with direct to consumer ortho, it pissed off like a ton of dentists, right? Like a orthodontist, everyone was like, you can't do this, you're not taking into account this, and this. People were just this is a money grab and blah, blah, blah. So I know one of the biggest complaints that I would see either talking to my buddy who's an orthodontist or just on, Facebook groups and stuff like that was that they felt like you never diagnosed perio or anything before, right? So they would you'd see these cases where this patient would be in not your company, but a different company, right? And they'd almost show the post-op, and they'd be like, oh, the teeth moved, but the patient had 8-9 millimeter pockets, no bone left. And you're like, that to me, that would be considered like a malpractice thing, right? You shouldn't be starting orthodontics when you didn't have all the information before. So, and then kind of going back to like not diagnosing cavities before. So was that a big issue for you guys too? Like you had kind of alluded to, and even if you try to do things on the front end of having a retail store or taking panos and doing that without actually having a dentist or an orthodontist do it, like, is that part of the reason you guys felt like you had to pivot to?
Yeah, we had extremely robust diagnostics coming from patients and obviously from the retail stores getting that. We had, dental assistants that were taking them. But this is what you just described is exactly what happened problematically for the industry, because you had 2 companies who I mentioned earlier that didn't have my co-founder and chief orthodontic officer, who's no longer with the company, but was an incredible stickler for diagnostic records. And he just he would just push, and he would reject cases if they didn't have the perfect ABO array of 8 photos, and if they didn't have the X-ray, and if they didn't have, all the things that he wanted, which meant that we were rejecting, as I went back, 30% plus of the cases that were coming in. And that's why the business model was more challenged, because our competitors were rejecting, 5%, right? And so it made acquisition costs harder. But ultimately, from a clinical perspective, of course, when you're seeing, we have 100,000 patients who go through treatment, you're going to have edge case challenges that come through. But for the most part, the orthodontic network that we built was saying, hey, like, you need to go see a dentist before you do this, or you need to go for this case to an ortho, or you need perio help. And so, like, it's this challenge that exists in healthcare, where if you're too commercially oriented, you can do right in the short term and very wrong in the long term, which is exactly the situation you just described. And if you're on the other side, which is, I think, where we have lived historically as a company, you end up with more challenging business situation. And that's where I think ultimately that's why the direct to consumer market didn't really work, both clinically and commercially. Because if you think about what products are patients buying that are dental products, the ones that are recommended by their dentist, every Colgate and Crest and Philips Sonicare toothbrush and ad ends with the most often recommended product by your dentist. And dentists ultimately stopped recommending direct to consumer because they said, hey, here are all these problems that we're seeing.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I think, honestly, I think within the dental community, right, I think you have to kind of toe that line of, like, how do we provide value, but how do you feel like we're not taking away from the dentist? And I think that, unfortunately, right, you guys just kind of got lumped in with other players, like you said, who maybe were a little bit more, like, loose on what they let through, and then it just created this almost bad blood. And so I think it's cool that you recognize that, say, hey, we need the dentist for this, and that now it's how do we work together? And I think that was pretty smart.
I feel like we have crossed the chasm there. I think dentists now recognize that CandidPro is an entirely dentist-driven solution. We have no direct-to-consumer. 98% of the folks who were involved in the core kind of TTC company are no longer here in the business. It's a totally different company, but it is our DNA. Now, Dentsply Sirona also had DTC, and Invisalign invested and owned 15 to 20% of Smile Direct Club at one point. So I think everybody, to some extent, is guilty of involvement in the direct-to-consumer space. Again, because it was commercially and in theory a good idea. Ultimately, it just wasn't the right solution for both patients as well as doctors.
Right. Yeah. So how did you get involved in this? Like, where did all this come from? Because this sounds like, like a workflow problem of, like, I have experience doing this and there's not a good solution. But what's your background? How did this develop?
I have worked, before I started Candid, I was at 3 other startups before. So I was at a company called Zimride, which became Lyft, which was a pivot. And I will say that did give me confidence in pivoting Candid to CandidPro. And so went through that, was one of the very first people working on Lyft before we had the name, right? And scaling and building that out. And then a couple other startups, most recently one that sold to Capital One in 2016. And then I started Candid. The idea from Candid, I would say, came from 2 different places. One is I didn't have ortho growing up, and my dentist told me it was $5,000, and I was making, like, living in California, I don't know, post-tax, like $30,000 a year. And I was like, this is insane. I can't pay for this. Like, there's no way it would make sense. And I'm busy. I'm traveling. I can't come back every, like, 3 weeks to get something changed. Like, this it didn't make sense. So I was intrigued. And then my co-founder, his dad, who's our director of orthodontics, so he was an orthodontist, Schulman Group professor, at I think Wash U or University of St. Louis. He was very involved, and he had kind of pushed us to think about this in a different way. We saw Smile Direct Club going, but he said this is going to end up in a disaster, and there's a better way to do it. And so actually, a lot of the initial thinking came from both Dr. Ed Shaheen, who's our director of orthodontics at Candid, and his son, who initially kind of brought me in with the idea, and then also our original chief clinical officer, who kind of had been applying a similar model for his patients about really how do I get down to 1 or 2 office visits, even in ortho, using aligners.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, cool. So then do you think that there's, like, a strategic advantage to being kind of second in the market almost, or, kind of someone of like in both scenarios, kind of, Lyft came after Uber, and Uber, changed how the taxi industry was ran. And Invisalign was obviously one, the first, to kind of pave the way for clear aligners and at home stuff.
And then even like Smile Direct was
and
coming
Smile
out,
Direct,
right?
yeah. So what was there a strategic advantage to knowing that? Like, okay, I don't have to like break through this whole thing. I can just, take what model is there and then
Make it a little better.
Make it way better. Yeah.
Yeah. In healthcare, there are 3 different types of businesses that succeed, right? The number one is having IP protection. And Invisalign had 20 years of IP protection for the computer-aided design of moving teeth. So they had a huge head start. They certified hundreds of thousands of dentists and orthodontists around the world and built a giant technology moat. And that is going for us long term. It will take us a very long time to overcome all of the education and everything they've taught you. And I can explain many different things that I think you would do differently if you were starting the company today, even from a clinical perspective. So I think in our case, I don't think being the second mover is inherently a scale advantage. Where it is an advantage is we can look at all the mistakes that were made and the technology that was used to build something in the 90s and the early 2000s, the 3D printing, that is still being used today, and say, hey, why don't we use 3D printing technology that's twice as accurate? Let's use a plastic that is meaningfully better in its overall construction. Let's use certain components that are just more modern and move things forward. And ultimately that should, from a business perspective, it'll take a long time, but I would argue that our product is highly advantaged being later on in the market because of where technology has gone. And it lets us focus on building novel technology that will then solve the pain points of customers in ways that our competition can't, where there is always an innovator's dilemma of I've already so invested in what I've built. Am I just going to scrap it? And the Uber point is a great one, where Travis had no innovator's dilemma when he was building Uber. He was like, all right, I've got Uber X looks like it's going to be bigger. Now we're doing Uber X, right? So he just went all in on making those switches and those changes. And it usually, it takes a lot to do that. And a lot of times you have to be a private company because you're going to tank your earnings and it's going to, it's going to change dramatically. So I think there are always advantages. Amazon being, the digital bookstore rather than the Barnes and Noble or the Borders turned out to be a pretty good secondary, second mover there. They just waited for the internet to come about and then built something pretty great. So I think that there are always advantages to being second, but obviously first with IP protection gives you a long time to build a moat.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. Because that's all I think we graduated, 2013? Mm-hmm. My memory is already going, but, that's just the only, Invisalign became like Kleenex, right? Where no one calls it tissue paper, even patients, right? If I went to a patient and I said, you need clear aligners, they would go, huh? But if I said you need Invisalign, they would go, oh, okay. So yeah, you're right. I think that is an advantage that they had decades of just protection to do that. Yeah. But
Obviously,
there's new companies coming out. And I think an advantage, like you said, you can have is when you're newer, maybe it's true or not true, but you could argue that you might be hustling more. You're not, there's not really that chance of getting stuck kind of where you're at. And you might be able to just innovate faster because you might just have that mindset a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I can see how that helps. So, okay. So now we'll pivot the podcast, right? And that's the theme, pivoting. Pivot. Yeah. Right.
Like Ross.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I know you didn't get a Friends reference right away, Alex?
Yeah, I did.
She's like, yeah.
I did. I didn't know if I should say it or not.
Yeah. So what other treatments, we were kind of thinking about this, could you outsource? Or if you're like, oh, that would be really cool if we didn't have to do that anymore. Or what's...
So keeping on theme, it's like, what else could we stay productive?
Yeah.
But not do the work?
Yeah. So
what else could we do in dentistry particular? Yeah.
I think at the top, I think robotic surgery and robotic hygiene at some point are coming. whether
robotic
I hope
hygiene
so.
would be sweet.
Sorry.
Sorry,
I
that just
really hope so.
perked me up.
That got me really excited.
Well, there was a company that was working on it, and I think that they didn't make it because they ran out of money at some point during the pandemic. But it's coming. Like
Because they had the same hygiene personality where they're like, we need more money.
Yeah.
we can't afford you, robot.
It may not replace the hygienist, but maybe the hygienist now can do 8 cleanings an hour instead of 1.
Yeah.
Right. Like they come in and do a quick check or, do the last mile. So it's a question of, are you replacing 100%? Same thing, robotic surgery, right? The robotic surgery might allow you to be way more accurate and faster and way more confident that your infection rates are going to be lower, whatever you may be. Think about the Intuitive Surgical, which has the Da Vinci robot, which great for surgery, right? That is coming, right? In fact, the Intuitive is an investor, I believe, in the Yomi robot, which is by Neosis, which is the implant surgery robot that you may have seen an ad for. So like these things are definitely coming. The question is just, is it going to be 100% or is it just going to make you a whole lot more efficient and allow you to practice better? And eventually, in theory, 100% could be automated. But for example, like, could you do hygiene at home, right? Like, is there some hygiene equivalent where every month, you're doing a super cleaning? And like Proclaim, which I don't know if you all have seen, but it's kind of like a car wash for your mouth. It helps folks reduce a lot of the plaque buildup in a way better way than a typical water flosser would. So there are tools that are coming both in the home and in the practice that should help take some of that burden off of you and just make you more efficient. It's going to start at 20-30%, but it will work its way up to 80-90%, maybe eventually 100%.
Oh, that's pretty
nice.
cool. If that could solve the hygiene problem, that would be sweet.
Yeah.
I mean, because the one that I kind of thought of too was like, at least for me, right? Because I related it back to myself and what other treatments would I like? Am I not going to do because I don't know enough about it and I don't really want to, and it would make me nervous? Would be like sleep apnea, right? And I was kind of joking about that recently. That I think it was like a year or two ago. Like on our dental website, it said that like we treat sleep apnea. I was like, whoa! I remember I had to tell my marketer, I was like, we don't do sleep apnea. Don't. Yeah, that would not be good. But could a lot of that be outsourced? And maybe it is already. I just don't know. But could a lot of that be outsourced when it comes to like designing an appliance or anything like that, or doing like where the studies are?
So we need like a kit. So if you could just be like, do you have sleep apnea? Or possibly it's like, yes. And it's like, buy this kit, and it's an at-home kit that measures your sleep study at home. I mean, they probably already have this, but then it's like, it diagnoses it. Well, not the robot, but like someone would have to, that has education.
Yeah.
You have a diagnosis, and then it's just like press play on the kind of appliance you need,
and then you go to your dentist.
Prints, and then it's like, oh, here you go. Like that'd be cool.
Yeah,
I can build that for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I mean, you kind of already have a lot of the stuff.
No,
yeah.
You can run with that one. That'd be cool.
Yeah, we'll run with it. We might be running with it already. I
don't know statistics, but I think a lot of people do have sleep apnea that's untreated.
Oh, that's definitely it's definitely like a trending health thing that people are on the lookout for.
Can't
right?
breathe. Yeah.
But yeah, that would be an interesting kind of like thing that to me seems. It's not obviously the same as orthodontics. I mean, you could argue, right? Like you're improving airway and stuff with that, with ortho, and sleep apnea can help with that too. But it seems like pretty similar, like what a workflow could be to that.
Yeah. And same thing even with like just printing like sports guards. Like if you have like the device, it scans it and it's like, oh, I need a mouth guard for, whatever sport. It's mailed to you and it's there.
We've seen there's companies like that that have been around for a bit that like you take the impression and do that. I don't know how much is digital, but yeah. And then,
but that's just another thing too, that it's like probably not as productive. Like how many people play sports? How many people probably need one? Like probably a lot more than what we're, diagnosing and giving to patients. So it's like, just make that like super easy, and you don't even have to you need this. And they're like, okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess we can see, because maybe you'll know this. We'll describe this next one. You might just be like, yeah, this already exists. But the other thing too is when we were talking, Alex, about like digital workflow, right? Like we never got into our practices into like getting a sprint ray or a form lab or any type of anything like that. And same thing, you were kind of talking through what your pain points would have been with it.
Well, just like, obviously there's like retainers and aligners and stuff like that you can print in your office and stuff, but I think you have to like design it yourself or something. Like, again, I don't know anything about this because I've kind of stayed clear. I'm like, no, I'm just going to stay in my lane of like doing some, business dentistry stuff. But like, I would rather just prompt it to like, I need this for this, and then just do it. Like, have it just do it on its own. Like that would be easy.
Yeah, like
for
if there
me.
was if there was a company that almost like managed your digital workflow for you. So like, kind of how like, I think what is it, like Dandy Labs, kind of like they'll give you the scanner and then you have to use them, right? Like if there was a company that like gave you all this stuff for a digital workflow and was like, well, then you either have to buy the resin from us or that kind of things, and we'll just manage all your stuff. So when you scan it and then we'll print everything off, we'll do it for you. That would be,
yeah, just give me the instructions, then we'll do it. And it's like, oh, okay, that's less work for me.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And then you're just leasing the equipment from them, right?
Sure.
And yeah.
Maybe that exists.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know. I know that Dandy and Glidewell and, and every lab, and their mother offer all this stuff at the lab. And then, for example, Glidewell offers a mill, and the CEREC, as is, in office. So like there are certain, and Sprint Ray, of course. So there are definitely in-office procedures. I think the question is just, do you want to be a lab tech or do you want to be a dentist? And I would still challenge I think there are some economic reasons where it makes sense to do your own printing, but I would challenge you, and I would challenge dentists who are doing a lot of their own work to see how much time that's taking to, do your own printing and do your own milling and all the work versus saying, hey, I'm going to be super efficient and do what I do. There's probably puts and takes where some folks it makes a lot of sense, but bringing all that stuff into your office a lot of time is just going to add additional time and complexity and take away from efficiency unless you get really good at it. So it's the same thing with ortho, right? Like you can nail it, and there's probably a small percentage of people that are really good at optimizing that digital workflow and the lab tech side, and they're really precise and want to go in and work in the CAD CAM. But I would guess that the everyday dentist, that's not what they should be spending their time on. They need to figure out how to drive more efficiency and then outsource some of those components to the most efficient, most cost-effective, kind of highest tech labs that are out there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, because I think the only way I would do something like that is if someone like managed it for me.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. Like you said, it's another job.
Yeah.
Like to do that, and we already have.
I think it's one of those that like it sounds cool. It sounds cool like when you hear it, and then when you go into it more, unless like you said, like we have some friends that they lecture on it and they do all that.
Oh,
well,
yeah,
of course he's got his like systems down. Like he knows exactly what he's doing, and he can train everyone because he's passionate about it and wants to do it. But if you don't have that passion for that, I would argue that you just created a way bigger problem for yourself.
Yeah.
Someone here needs to build that robot that replaces hygiene or makes them more efficient. So then we're all less stressed.
Yeah.
But no, Nick, I mean, I appreciate you coming on, talking to us. It was great to kind of hear what you're doing within ortho. I think it's awesome. And yeah, pretty soon we'll get all replaced by robots. That'll be good. Cool. Well, thanks again, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.